Mr. Speaker, I rise today to bring attention to our nation's infrastructure. I'm talking about our roads, our bridges, our rail corridors, our waterways and dams, the investments that over 2 centuries have made America great, the greatest economy in the world. We have a long history in investing in the infrastructure in America, starting with the canal and rail systems in the 19th century, the highways and air transportation systems in the 20th century. However, over the last 25 years, we have lived off the infrastructure investments our parents and grandparents made in the previous generations. Why? Because there has been a lack of political will here in Washington, D.C. to make new investments. But Congress, working with the President, must face this challenge head on. I believe there is bipartisan support for infrastructure investment. Having been part of a bipartisan conversation this year with members of Congress and with the administration, there is an attempt to offer a proposal to make major investments in our nation's infrastructure. And we're talking about 4 different areas. First, there needs to be an incentive component. I strongly support incentivizing states and local governments to provide their own funding for these efforts. We know infrastructure projects move forward most effectively when local, state, and federal governments all do their part. In the San Joaquin Valley, in my district, Merced, Madera, and Fresno counties have all increased their local sales tax to pay for critical transportation projects. This year, earlier, California enacted a bill to increase state gas tax and vehicle fees to provide over $52 billion over the next 10 years in California for much-needed transportation projects. And while there needs to be done more in California, we know that if we provide incentives across the country, states ought to come up and do their part as well. The second focus of the administration's action is to support projects in rural areas. On Wednesday last week, the Ag Committee held a hearing in which we discussed strategic infrastructure investments in rural areas with the goal of increasing opportunities. The importance of investing in our rural areas cannot be overstated. Too often, rural America gets left behind in the infrastructure and development of conversation. I know I represent a large part of rural America in the San Joaquin Valley in California. The third focus is transformative projects, projects that make creative and dramatic changes. I've always supported and will continue to support these projects, such as high-speed rail in California, California Water Fix. Water is so critical to the West, and especially in the San Joaquin Valley. Water provides the food that we have on America's dinner table every night. It's a national security issue. These projects support deeper and systemic change, and they can have a large scale and lasting impact in the future development of our nation. They are investments in our future, like those our parents and grandparents made in the past. Lastly, the administration talks about loan programs. These can be helpful. Overall, I support these 4 components. But first, we must not pick winners and losers when improving our nation's infrastructure. This is, of course, very challenging. We need to have a policy that must rank priorities and decide how much we spend and where we spend. We also must establish critical criteria to ensure that infrastructure decisions promote fair distribution and cost effectiveness, doing the most good in critical areas. And second, while I support public-private partnerships, they should not provide subsidies to projects that the private sector would already finance themselves. Sound infrastructure is literally and figuratively the foundation of our nation's economy. It is what made America the greatest economy in the world. Countries around the world are making investments in their infrastructure, while the United States sits on the sidelines, engaging in a political debate that does not reflect the reality of the policy choices we have and the decisions we must make. We must come together, ladies and gentlemen, as Democrats and Republicans, to address these serious problems of our nation's infrastructure as Americans in a bipartisan way. Because no transportation system, no water infrastructure system, no improvement in our energy grid, and all the other elements of our infrastructure are Democratic or Republican. They are a basis of an investment in America. And that's what we should be doing as members of Congress with this administration. So let's act as legislators. Let's act and show that we can work together in a bipartisan fashion. Let's show some profiles and courage. I yield back the balance of my time.